All right, here we go. Brand new Flyers Daily for the 28th of March, 2024. Flyers Daily, presented as always by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. Gauntlet is now in the rear view. Flyers, that overtime loss against the Rangers is in the rear view. We'll talk about that again in a second. I'm not going to fully put that in the rear view, but the Flyers are back tonight back to your regularly scheduled NHL teams. You get the Montreal Canadiens tonight, Flyers and L'Habitant from Montreal. Real quick on the Ranger game to put a cap on it. Yesterday's episode, I obviously recorded the episode right after the game, which I usually do. I record in the evening for the next day's episode. I post them generally about midnight on the day of the podcast. So, for example, this podcast will be posted about midnight or 1 a.m., and the YouTube channel upload usually goes through by like 2 a.m. So I recorded that right after the game, and it was one of those episodes where, there's a lot of visceral frustration that takes place. Now, this season has been different in that regard, and because it's been surprising. I didn't see this season coming. I thought this season would be much more down than up. When I looked at the attrition in the roster that they had from a top pairing defenseman and Provorov, no matter what you thought about Provorov and Kevin Hayes and Tony DeAngelo and James Van Riemsdyk, all these players, I understand, didn't fit into the time frame. But I looked at, again, who they replaced them with, Ryan Poehling and some other players and some young players stepping up, and didn't see 14D coming to be able to play for the team this year. But I didn't have this expectation. So this year has been, I talk about this quite a bit. The best way to happiness in sports is to have reasonable expectations, to have your expectations in order and not just be, the blind fan. I remember when I was doing sports talk radio, the Eagles schedule will come out and you get callers. They're going to go 16-0. I can't see them losing to any of these teams. Well, that's not reality. And you have to have a very realistic expectation based on, what you believe are important, based on the amount of question marks that a team goes in with, how those question marks may or may not be answered, both positive or negative, and how things will play out. And you set up an expectation that you believe is realistic, and you have kind of a benchmark that where you think the team should get to. If they don't get to it, you're probably not happy. And if they do get to it or beyond, you're probably happy because you base that expectation. Now, that can change throughout a season as, more data comes in on a particular team or a division or opponents or whatever it might be. But you have your expectation. And I didn't expect that the Flyers would be sitting here on the 28th of March in a playoff position, battling for a chance to go to the postseason with all things considered. And those expectations have gone up and down a little bit throughout this season as well. But the only time I remember this season being as frustrated as I was after that Ranger overtime loss on Tuesday was all the way back. Geez, I'm going to take you back really far here. It was all the way back on November 7th when the Flyers lost 2-1 to the San Jose Sharks. San Jose was 0-11. They got their first win of the season. It was against the Flyers. And to me, I called that, at that time, an inflection point in the season. It was a fork in the season. Which way are you going to go? Now, they came out of that and played really well. And that inflection point, they turned things in the right direction and kind of led them to where they are now. The Ranger game isn't like that. That the frustration is very different. One, because that was obviously very early in the season. And then two, there are elements of the Ranger game I liked. I liked the way the team played in the first two periods. I thought that they limited the Rangers incredibly well, protected the middle of the ice. But in the third period, things kind of just went haywire, and it was back and forth. And it frustrated me. The result frustrated me because it's the last game of that 7-game gauntlet. And I thought that 2 points were there to be had. And, I don't look at any particular player and go, oh, it's your fault. I mean, a lot of people point to goaltending, especially when you give up 6 goals. And I understand that. It wasn't Sam Erson's greatest game. I thought he played well through the first 2 periods. Didn't see a ton of high quality. And then his third period in overtime, a couple of the goals were quirky for sure, like the one that pops up and falls right to the stick of Alex Lafreniere. I mean, nothing he can do about that. I didn't like the overtime goal, but it was just one of those games that really irritated me. And the way it ended up playing out. Yeah, you got a point. And yeah, that point's really important right now and at this time of year for a team pushing to the playoffs in a tooth and nail race. But that one frustrated me. The only other one I could even kind of put on the same par, again, was that game back on November 7th against San Jose. There hasn't been a lot of times where I've gotten really frustrated. I've remained really even keel this season. Again, a lot of that is because I didn't expect them to be where they are. And there's been way more ups than downs. And even though there was some bad losses in there, um, those are going to happen in an 82-game season. That is a built-in expectation that I have year in and year out. Same thing for individual players. There's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. But overall, this team has far exceeded my expectations and a lot of people's expectations. So that's the bow on the Ranger game. Tonight, it's back at it against the Montreal Canadiens. Now, the Canadiens right now are sitting in the 7th spot in the Atlantic Division of the Eastern Conference. 71 games played, 27, 32, and 12, 66 points. They are minus 49 in goal differential, 4-4-2 in their last 10, and they've won their last 2. The Flyers are in the 3rd spot in the Metro by a point over the Washington Capitals. Capitals still 2 games in hand, but the Flyers 9 games remaining, 73 played, 36, 27, and 10, 82 points, minus 9 in goal differential, 4-4-2 in their last 10, and they've lost their last 2 games. And really the big key tonight, like we could go through all kinds of different elements about this game tonight, but none of it matters. None of it matters. There's one thing that matters when it comes to tonight's game. Will professional NHL players for the Flyers not let the human nature element impede the task at hand? And the task at hand, come hell or high water, and I don't care how they get 2 points tonight. I don't care if the game is 7-1 or 1-0 or 3-2. I don't care as long as you get 2 points. It doesn't matter to me. I don't give a damn how you get the 2 points tonight. I just demand you get the 2 points because now you're not facing teams in this gauntlet of the schedule. And there is the natural thing of not taking this opponent to the same degree that you took the teams, Toronto twice, Boston twice, Florida, Carolina, and the New York Rangers through the gauntlet. That's human nature. You can't, I don't think you run from it. I talked to John Tortorella yesterday for Hockey and Hounds. He said it's not really something that I take on head on because I'm not going to insult my team. They know. The players know. It's not the coach's job to get the players ready to play this game. It's professional players' job to get their own butt ready to play this game tonight. And go into Montreal and take care of business. Show that there's not going to be any attrition from the 7 games and get 2 points tonight. Get 2 points Saturday. We'll worry about Chicago coming up on Saturday, but tonight it's about the Montreal Canadiens, and that is a big, big element. The Flyers have got to be prepared to play this game like they were prepared to play the New York Rangers or Florida or Carolina, Toronto twice, and Boston. You have to be, because if not, it will bite you. Teams playing with no pressure, playing out the string, can play a very loose brand of hockey that can be advantageous to a team that doesn't take them seriously. So the Flyers need to go in there tonight and get the job done. We'll see if that happens. It's a big question mark going into tonight's game. It is. It's not a game that I go into as somebody that's watched this team through this entire year and been around the game for 46 or 47 years of my almost now 52 years on this planet, that I feel super comfortable with because of that human nature element to it. So very important matchup tonight. I do want to get to some comments and some things that came in via social media or email over the last 24 or 48 hours as well. Some of the comments on the video, the YouTube video of yesterday's episode, John said that I'm hoping the Flyers sign a veteran goalie over the summer. I feel the same missed opportunity to get 2 points as based on last night's game. Um, Theoretically, I've always been a guy that if you have a young goalie, I believed a veteran backup was a good thing. Was one of those things that a veteran that was a starter in the league, we had that in Brian Elliott here, obviously, a guy that can help show the professional ropes to a young player that has not been a long-time NHL starter, I think is a good thing. But I was also open to the idea, and I was opened to the idea that sometimes when you do that, I'll just say I talked to somebody in the Flyers organization in management, that sometimes when you do that, the starter, the younger guy, doesn't feel like his crease is ever under threat. He doesn't feel threatened to lose the job. And the person I talked to is a firm believer, and I agree with this, is that competition drives performance a lot of times. A guy that has to battle for every start or battle to get the crease is going to be sharper, compete harder, all those things, than a guy that has it and doesn't feel threatened by it. And a lot of times you can do that with two younger goaltenders. Look, we saw at the beginning of this year with Sam Ersson and Carter Hart when the two were there pushing each other, battling for starts, battling for the crease. Those two were very, very good. So I don't know that we're going to look at that this offseason as a veteran to be in tandem with Sam Ersson. Not to mention, Alexei Kolosov is coming over. And I see on social media a lot of people saying, just throw him into the NHL. It's not going to hurt his development. Well, maybe it's not going to hurt his development overall, but I will warn you that just throwing a goalie from the Continental Hockey League into the NHL, and people go, well, he's got to be better than Sandstrom, or he's got to be better than Peterson. Maybe. But I'll tell you this story. I remember reading an article from, I've cited this before, from Semyon Varlamov, who had played in the NHL but decided to go back to the KHL after the 2011 season. And he went back over, and then after the lockout, he came back to North America. And he said when he got back here, after playing in the KHL for a couple of years, he had to relearn the NHL game. Now, this is a guy that was already playing in the NHL, left, and came back, and still had a huge adjustment. And it wasn't because of the size of the ice. That has nothing to do with it. Well, it's partial. But the biggest thing for goalies that come over that play in European leagues is the traffic. The traffic, and for the guys that do play on a bigger ice, how much quicker pucks come to you because everything is condensed into a smaller area. But in the KHL, they don't crowd the front of the net. There's so much ice, and they play a perimeter game. Goalies aren't forced to look through screens, look around traffic, look for cross-ice passes and back doors, and hidden release points. It's not as simple. I think some people look at the goaltending position a lot of time and go, goalie's job is they shoot puck, he stop puck. Baloney. There's so much more to it than that. And just throwing a guy in there to say, well, he's got to be better than what we have, it's not that simple. I'm not saying not to do it. I bring Kolosov over. I let him play a couple games with the Phantoms, and I see where he is. And then I make a decision. But I don't just go with this blind thing as I'm not going to screw up his development. I'll throw him in there. That's an ignorance to the position and what it is to play in the NHL versus playing in the KHL. Now, I never played in the KHL. I never played in the NHL. But I talked to a lot of guys that have. And it sounds awfully pragmatic to just think you can just throw this guy in the midst of a playoff push and put him in that kind of pressure onto him and go, it's not going to screw him up. I can tell you what, if he goes in there and gets crushed, it's not going to help him. It's not going to help him. That position is so much about the mental aspect of the game. Yeah, and some guys come into the league and they get touched up and they learn from it. But I will I look at a couple of guys like Igor Shesterkin or Ilya Sorokin, two goalies that did come over from the KHL. But when they got here, they were 24, almost 25 years of age and played some AHL games. So it's not as simple as just throwing a guy out there. Kolosov, much younger. So we'll see how that one plays out and how that position plays out. It's going to look, that position's going to have something to say about the result of this season and whether this team makes the playoffs or not. Another guy had commented on the video, and just said, "Hey, look, they got a point. Be happy with the point." I'm not happy with the point. It was an important point, but I'm not going to just be happy that they got 1 point. Let me give this guy his credit. It was Max Austin. He says, "So complainy, man. Take the point and be happy." Max, no. I'm not going to just be happy with the point when I think there was 2 there to be had. Why would I settle for that when I thought there was 2 there to be had? It doesn't make any sense to me. Sports aren't about settling. You're in a playoff push, for goodness sake. There was 2 points there. Should have had the second one. You had a lead going into the third. Squandered it. So, no, I'm not just going to be happy for the one I have. It's not the way I'm wired. I know that's not the way a lot of other people here are wired as well. And then last thing, I'm going to get to this email. This comes in from Eric. He said, "Hey, Jason, love the podcast. Listen every morning on the way to work. Had 2 thoughts after the most recent Ranger game and post game." He said, "First, I accept the reasoning for starting Paling in the 3-on-3 overtime for obvious reasons already stated. Skates well, two-way responsibility, etc. However, there's absolutely no reason Noah Cates should be on the ice in a regular season OT, especially with the type of season he's had." And that's a good point. Last year, Noah Cates was an elite 200-foot defender in the NHL. He hasn't been that this year. It hasn't happened all year, as Eric says. He said, "I know he had a fairly long-term injury. He had to work his way back, but he has not lived up to those expectations this year. He's a good 5-on-5, third, fourth-line winger. If he ultimately settles into that role, it's still a success considering where he was picked in the draft. But as much as I have loved most of the things Tortorella has done to quickly revamp the future outlook of this team, he does deserve criticism for the decision." He says, quote, "Safe is death." And we do hear Tort say that quite a bit. "This is his own mantra. So why does he completely change his coaching style from quick thinking and pushing the play in regulation and then play not to lose in overtime? I don't have a problem with Cates the player, but there's a handful of skilled guys on this team that he should be throwing out their start OT in his place." We've already heard the answer as to why Tortorella starts OT this way, but I wish someone would question him in regards to his play style and why he doesn't come out aggressive right away, since it clearly hasn't worked for 2 years now. Now, I don't know what their record was last year in overtime. I'll look it up as I'm talking here. This year, they've been to overtime 11 times. They've lost 7 of those games, and they've won 4 of those games this season. Last year, and you remember last year, the team in overtime last season was playing 3D at times, or 2D and a forward. And they got blitzed in overtime last year. They went to overtime 15 times last year, lost 12, won 3. So it has not been a strong suit. And that is a great point that you bring up, Eric. Safe is death. And look, when there's more ice out there, maybe that's the time to take more risk and put high-powered guys out there like TK or Lawton at the center position and get Owen Tippett out there to start because of the way they can skate. Yeah, again, like I said on yesterday's episode, I get the philosophy behind it by starting with guys that are good face-off guys or defenders to get a stop and get possession and then get those guys out there. But if you never get to that too often, what's the point? There is no point. It doesn't matter. It's a non-factor because you didn't win the face-off, you didn't win possession, or you didn't get a stop. And the Carolina game and that game against the Rangers, they never possessed the puck. If I go back to, somebody pointed this out to me on Twitter, I think the Toronto overtime loss back in February, when Austin Matthews had that natural hat trick in the second period, was also one where they didn't get a top line out there. So they got to look at that. Look, they got 9 games left this year. that may come into play. That could be the difference still. Got to look at that. In talking to Torch yesterday, I think they're going to approach it differently. In the Hockey and Hounds that comes out today, you'll hear he and I talk about what they started overtime with. I'm not going to throw a spoiler out there, but we talked about it. So you'll be able to hear that coming up on Hockey and Hounds, which will be released today on all the other podcast channels and also on the Flyers YouTube channel as well. All right, it's Flyers La Habitante tonight. Flyers in Montreal to take on the Canadiens. Get a win. I don't care how you do it. Come away with 2 points. Come through customs. When they ask you what you want to declare when you're coming back in, 2 points. That's what I declare. All right, everybody, have a great night. Enjoy the hockey tonight. We'll talk to you tomorrow on a brand new Flyers Daily.